We're adding to the next speakers in the room.
And we are live. Yes. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. We are super happy to welcome all of you in our Facebook Live chat. If I must say about how we are talking about new discussion like climate, what is global warming, and what I'm super happy to have amazing panel here. And I would like to see how we can create more understanding when it's come to different kind of communities such as from Bangladesh, from Nigeria, from MENA region, and from South Asia, and even to Europe, how this discussion has been taken into understanding, and how understanding of climate change is changing different norms, different discussion, and creating more discrimination, and how we can address this negotiation with our own experience and with the feminist lens and with the inclusion. I'm super happy to have so many amazing speakers here. One by one, I will go with them, but I will start with one of the amazing speaker we have, Sheran Khalili. Originally, she's from Kurdish and now living in Oslo, and super happy she will share her experience. She was part of one discussion which happened on the 5th of June in Geneva, and she was there as one of the speaker. So Sheran, over to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity for today for us to discuss the crucial role of women championing resilience amidst the sort of triple crisis of climate change. And we are talking not only about climate change, we're also discussing the area of food scarcity and energy challenges. So today I'm here and happy to share as well my own experiences and highlight the remarkable contributions of women from various regions addressing these issues. I was really humbled and happy to have had a chance to celebrate the World Environment Day in Geneva amidst powerful women-led conversations on climate change. And these sort of high-level dialogues have been sort of in partnership. So, and that's what we see how important it is that we are connected together, and that we not only are discussing it in our own community, but we're also coming and sharing our experiences to co-create, but also to see how we can provide the voice of the women who are championing resilience and multiplying solutions at the forefront of climate impact. So to me personally, it was so inspiring to be part of a diverse and inclusive platform, as both we are here represented by leaders and voices from the global south to the MENA region, also representatives from different areas who are sharing their insights on how policy makers can and should prioritize anything that is about climate change, and reverse the policy cycle, and how can we also be involved. And we're all championed together for the same goal. Our end goal is the same. So what we can do is to be united and come together and do it together. With these multi-stakeholder dialogues, we're also here being represented, sort of being at the far end of the solution, because we know that the solutions often come from those who are experiencing the most, from the local regions, from those that are at the grassroots level actually experiencing the severe climate change, with women here being at the forefront of this. So with this sort of, when we're presenting in these different spaces, I always say, even here, I'm based in Oslo, Norway. We recently had our first heat wave day historically this early on, and that is an unusual experience. And with rising temperatures, we have to say that women also has to rise, because this is not something that is only for sort of one of the aspects, but we can't have proper climate change policies without having women being on a 50-50 level. So coming from the Kurdish region of Iran, I have experience, and I have sort of as well knowledge of that the first-hand impacts of climate change, especially on water resources. This is also one of the things that we discussed on the World Environment Day, and how it directly affects the food scarcity. And as the saying goes, it is no water and no food. The scarcity of water resources in the Kurdish region, saying some examples from that, has a severe consequence for agriculture, for making it difficult to grow crops and sustain livelihoods. And this again falls under the aspect that how it always is inspiring to see how women, and particularly being from the Southeast Asia and MENA region, have actually always utilized their traditional knowledge and techniques to tackle a challenge posed by climate change. Women from our different regions have always been implementing sustainable practices from their traditions, such as water conserving methods, to the way they crop the fields, to also the way they reuse the material. I know from my own family background, when we were raised up, that how many times we would reuse the plastics, how many times we would reuse the boxes that were given from the different aspects. So, and these practices not only promote resilience, but they also contribute to the overall health of the ecosystem. So it is crucial to adopt the feminist approach that we acknowledge the unique perspectives and experiences of women, and the way they have traditionally used the different aspects that they're using in their daily lives. And we need to envision a feminist response and solutions that foster an inclusive and just climate change ecosystem. And this means that we include the frontline actors, particularly women and feminist leaders, in decision-making processes. And a key aspect of what we're discussing here today is that by using this approach, we are ensuring that women and feminist leaders are occupying at least 50% of the decision-making positions. We are doing so so they can become champions of resilience, advocates for solutions, and activists for climate justice. And women have always constantly demonstrating their ability to foster positive change, not only within their communities, but also on a global scale. Their experiences, knowledge, and perspectives are really essential for developing the effective strategy, because they are experienced at the forefront, and their strategies would be much more effective because we're involving an area that is already known. We're talking as well about the access, the dispersion of access to the digital technologies versus the ones that are in the traditional way. So inclusion, to conclude with this, women have been at the forefront for a long time, but it's just about time to give them the visibility and acknowledgement that they deserve, of resilience building and in efforts of the face of the climate change. We need to recognize their invaluable contributions and empower them and bring their knowledge, because we need their knowledge. This is a knowledge that they have that we needed, and we are much more stronger to include them in these processes, because they know how their lands are made, they know their areas, and also by championing their resilience and working together. That is what we're here for today, and I'm looking so much forward to hear from my co-fellow speaker here today, and how we can plan ahead for toward a just and resilient world, in being a 50-50% where we can all be together. So thank you, and over to you, Anila.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you so much for pointing out very important discussion, how we can be more inclusive and how to bring different perspective, different knowledges on an equal and just approach. And I'm super happy we have Arizia Sultana from Bangladesh, we have Kathy who's joining us from Thailand, we have Ali Jelani who's also present how we can question and critique on a EU system. So it's very good. So maybe I will go to Anam as well, but I'm with the permission from Anam. Is it okay if I go to Razia, because she's based in Bangladesh and it's so difficult, to have a good connection. I'm super happy she's here. So thank you so much, Anam, for agreeing on that. Yes, Razia, thank you so much for joining all the way from Cost
Thank
Bazaar.
you.
Always a super excited and honor for us to have you there and presenting for the displacement sending of the people who are really facing the challenge and the impact of climate and living in a so much displacement and living in a poverty, living in a so much disaster and this climate change affecting them. I would love to see what's your insight from your side and how we as a community living in a global setting, how we can help and bring green energy solution and other kind of opportunity to help communities you are working with. So Razia, over to you.
Thank you so much. And I'm Rajesh Sultana, and Anila already told me. I live in Bangladesh, but my origin is Rohingya. My work in camp, also in host community. I will start with a small, um, uh, not story, just a feature like there is a very unclean water and no water, because this is related with the climate change. And this refugee, when they stayed in the mountain, and it's not the thing, there is not a proper system about the water, so people are drinking this unclean water, and water disease is available. And one thing I will say, there is also jaundice. What is HIV-C? What is the category of HIV-C? I think this is a hibiscus. This kind of it's a very common disease, and it starts with jaundice. So it is affect directly a liver. So it is very common now in camp. And when in the one house, men and women are both are affected, somehow if men are getting the chance of treatment or medicine, women are deprived. And because this happened, because women they don't have their voice, and because they have right to live, because they don't raise their voice, and they cannot say that I need also treatment. And it is very because I face this, I am dealing with this. And another issue, when I talk with the woman, why you prefer your husband first? I said, both you have right for living, but you always one thing she said, I have to live with my husband, and I have to obey his order. The thing, they are pressuring the woman. If they got the 6 month medicine, they are not dividing whole 6 month medicine for they keep for the man. So this is the thing happen in Rohingya camp. I can say this is the displaced people who start in Bangladesh Rohingya camp after 2017. Still, there is a no solution, and day by day the thing is worse. And climate disaster every day. Now this is the rainy season. The shelter is you can say there is a bamboo shelter, so people cannot stay in higher area because of landsliding. And directly men can run away anywhere, but women cannot, because they, whatever they have, if they children, if they want, they are not allowed to go outside the shelter. So at last she is affected, she is injured, but she didn't get anything, a proper treatment or proper support. So this is all happen, is all related to the climate. And another issue, the host community. Bangladesh is a river land, and every yearly 2 or 3 times that flood happen here, mainly in the lowland. When flood, and agriculture cannot they cannot do their agriculture, so it's affected whole family. So women are forced to leave house to do domestic household thing, what is very low wages. Because this happened, this woman, the affected is whole family, but the thing always targeted to the woman, because she is not only the earning member. Okay, I am supporting both work, but mainly even they become beggars. We say in the Bangladesh, we say that the seasonal beggar. Seasonal beggar is the most of the women and girl. Another issue, when anything happens, they force to their girls to marry, and ultimately again these girls face so many discrimination, child marriage, and early pregnancy. This is all happen to a girl, not only the mother, also the girl. So this all are connected because we are not taking any action. And there is very important empowerment. It's lack of empowerment. Women are forced to do begging, forced to do prostitution, forced to whatever. Not only because prostitution is a very high level, but we see seasonal prostitution also in the camp and in Bangladesh lowland area. This is very low percent, but the begging is very worst thing. Every time now, when you go outside, I live in town, when you stop your car, you can see the huge amount of women, young women, but they didn't get any job. So, and if we offer them jobs, no, because they are seasonal, when the flood is stopped, they will return their home. So the thing, it's like it's a systematically we force them to do begging, we force them to do whatever is illegal, and it's all affected to the woman and their dignity, their confidence, and what is the life of the meaning for them? Living is like eat and sleep and whatever they got. This is they cannot dream. If a woman cannot dream, how can we expect a better
Yeah.
future?
Yes. Yes.
Because a woman, a beggar woman, he always thinking about the money and food. So she never think about she will send her child in school. So she also force her children to begging. So this is like all impact is goes to the society.
Yeah.
So we have to be more, we have to be grow more attention, and we will do the
Yeah.
empowerment program. And myself, I am doing empowering women even the leadership in host community, also in them, but it's a very small way, but I am getting so many response, and I hope I can do more.
Yes.
And I hope Anila will be in Bangladesh, and you can
Sure.
your
Sure.
eyes, you can see the same. Okay, thank
So
you so much.
sure. Soon, very soon, Razia. You very raise this wish to have a woman to see more dream, to have more dreams. So I'm super happy. Kathy, you have the similar experience from your coming from China and now living in Netherlands. I would like to see how you see your intake, what Razia mentioned about especially with the agriculture. What's your insight about this?
Well, thanks a lot, Anya, and also thanks a lot, Razia, for sharing, from the field all the way from Bangladesh. First, I would like to share, thanks a lot, Anina, for inviting me to this such amazing and supportive and energetic women's support group, So yeah, for me, I have a dual role. Firstly, I am an agricultural development specialist. So throughout all my work, I travel a lot to the farm sites, to the rural villages, and my role is to leverage, mobilize innovative finance and innovative agri-food technologies to contribute to agri-food systems transformation. And my focus are mainly the least developed countries in Asian Pacific. So also throughout my work, a big focus is to mainstream women participation in agri-food value chain. So it's to ensure that rural women, they can get a share, or they also get benefits throughout all the developed agri-food commodity systems. So I have been during all the field trips in the farm, and actually one observation is particularly in the Asian Pacific rural context, you see a lot of farm households or the labor force, they are actually headed by women. So they are the main labor force or power for agri-food system development. But on the other hand, I fully agree with what Razia mentioned earlier on. you see a lot of vulnerabilities of those rural women. I want quickly give you two data. First data is that globally, there are 1.7 billion women and girls. They are living in the rural areas. And the second quick data is that women comprise, on average, 43% of the agricultural labor force in developing countries, and 15% in Eastern Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. So talking about all those women, despite their main labor force, but they are big in number, but compared to men, they lack access to productive resources, easy to name, we can name it. They compared to men, the lack of agriculture inputs, information, a lot of times in the countries that land is the issue, you can only put the husband or the male's name in a paper when it comes to agri-land registration. So they don't have the land rights. And even when you borrow money from the banks, again, is associated with your property. That is the men who go to the bank to borrow, right? So all those issues put rural women in such sort of challenge position. On the other hand, as we talked today, climate change, particularly in countries like Razia mentioned earlier, in Bangladesh, when the drought, flood, all these climate shocks come in, the rural women, they face higher risks and great burdens from climate change impacts. For instance, in their male farming systems, women and men, they often cultivate separate fields and they carry out different tasks. Rural women, they often experience more climate resilient impacts than their male counterparts. Women, particularly those rural women, they are instrumental in the fight against hunger and also climate change. So to sum up, I think the key message I want to sort of deliver today is that rural women, they are the key labor force in the agri-food system. They are also in the front line for climate change issues. However, they don't have a lot of resources and they lack so much of support. So we are calling for all the different stakeholders to invest in rural women, to bring the resources, bring the support to them. And when rural women are empowered, the results are palpable. Over to you. Thank you, Anina.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kathy. I really appreciate your insight. And I will go to the Anam, because Anam, you are not only climate and environment leadership first ever from Norwegian Pakistani assigned to climate delegation, but you are also bringing your insight as a researcher. We also have one more researcher in this discussion, but I would like to say as a climate delegation from bringing this insight, what you feel, what is missing, and how we can work together to create more visibility towards the importance of our work. Anam, over to you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I just want to say that first of all, there has been very good intakes on this subject already, and I feel that it is very important to kind of repeat the same thing over and over again to get in our unconsciousness that we are going to do this by default and make it a norm. And I think it comes with the attitudes as well, because we are very much reluctant to something, when it comes to leadership, we do not always think about that women should be in these kind of roles to start with. And I think this is the kind of narrow that we have to break down now, and to speak up more, and these kind of events that that we can actually listen to them, that makes them more resilient and more prepared about what their future is going to entail. And my thing is just that, what I feel is, women, they are not only, well, when it comes to leadership, they're not only, the one who are going to solve the climate change, but they're also the one who is most affected, as we all, agreed on it. And these are the kind of things that are, very close to our heart, because imagine that if you're in this kind of situation and you know that you are going to be affected by this most, but then you don't have the forums, the dialogues, the people that can listen. And these are the kind of intake that takes much to understand. And it's also, the attitudes that we have, that is actually also related to these kind of norms that we do build in our society. And when speaking of COP, I do see that there is a very, underrepresented by women. And it is not because women does not understand what she is going to handle. Our woman does understand. We do have examples from Bangladesh as well. She knows that she has to go out there. She's seeing child marriages. So what is actually happening? Why are we not getting to this kind of position, to these roles? And I think that is also because for a long time we have made the tendencies, we made it a norm that only a man can tell what a woman should do. And this is the kind of, attitudes and problems that we are facing now. And therefore, I think it is very much important now to be more vocal and to, as Seyran said, that we should, create more synergies, and not only about because that we are going to face climate change, but because we do want the change. We do want to be there because we know that we can actually speak up more for women out there. And therefore, I'm just saying that these climate-related disasters that are going to happen, and they're happening, women are the most vulnerable. And the flood in Pakistan, last year, I was in Pakistan when the flood came. And therefore, I was watching this kind of injustice before my eyes, and I could not, after that moment, it changed me forever, because I've always been with this research, I've always been writing, but when you are like, this is my case now and I need to take it, and this is my responsibility. So when you automatically take this responsibility, things change and thing happens. And these are the kind of attitudes that we need to create, but we also need to make men more aware about these kind of situations that we are in right now. And we do, as a woman, not only as a woman that I believe that, but also research shows that women have unique knowledge and skills that can be valuable in climate action. And they are often, the primary users of natural resources, and they have a deep understanding of how these resources are going to be used and managed. And this kind of knowledge, when it comes to more practice, then you start to see that how much value it creates for the society and community. And therefore, the role of women is not only important to only handle this kind of issues and crises. These are important in board and leadership, because she's the one who knows this problem from the grassroots. So, it's one of the acknowledgement that we also need to be more vocal about. And then, this all this kind of organization and how the community should organize, and, what the efforts should be to adapt to climate change. These are very important to take and undermine into this question. So what I feel like it's also, not only about helping women up, but also acknowledging that the help of women in climate action, they can help to build more equitable and sustainable societies. And when women are included in decision-making processes, they're more likely to advocate for policies that benefit the poor and vulnerable. So it's also about, promoting sustainable development from a woman's perspective, that is very important as well, to make people understand that it is not always a man who's going to save women. that is not the norm. That is not what is actually the reality. The woman knows, and this is her skill, and this is her knowledge. So you should listen to her more. So, and to ensure this kind of participation in fully climate action, then again, it is important to remove the barriers that prevent them from doing so. And, these are, again, the lack of access to education, and the one that I mentioned, the forums and forums that they don't know who can listen to them, and all these kind of cultural norms that we also need to take under consideration. And especially what is happening also in Iran right now, it is not only, about climate action any longer, it's about the women, the role of the women in a very large masculine society. That is a problem in itself, because then, again, we are, trying to build this kind of norms that only a man can rule this kind of societies, and it is not sustainable. Unfortunately, this is not going to help. So to speak up more is going to be very much important, but also to create those kind of safe spaces. And even coming from Pakistan, I know that Pakistan women are very much more, vocal, also because they do have a little bit more access to speak up. However, they don't have the resources. So, we abroad, we can be the voice of these women, and we need to be the voice of these women because they don't have anyone else. And even how much, people wants to help in the local country, sometimes, the lack of areas to speak and discuss and debate, they are very much likely to disappear. So I will not speak too much because we are going to, I'm going to take all the time then, but then I'm just going to the next question, that about, pledging to this 50-50 participation at COP28. That is extremely important because that's an actual gender action plan, which can change a lot. And if women see that their representation is going to increase, they're likely to be more active in that role. They're more likely to work for this and likely to be, on this kind of spaces to envoy their voice to the population. And also, businesses, governments, and civil society, they need to take the measurements, and they need to make sure that women should be fully represented in all terms of climate action, and that their research, their acknowledgement, their skills are going to be heard and going to be, supported. So therefore, if there are some kind of organization that are already supporting women, like your own, these are the kind of organization that are going to be very important for the future stakeholders, and also those who are working effectively on climate action, and and those who are working with research as well. So promote, that is like the underline. And also those who have more resources, they can and they should donate money to boost this kind of innovation that is happening, and to speak up more about the importance of the work that they are doing, because that is more likely the kind of channels that women need. So sometimes when, people, they hear about climate change, they need to make sure that they also listen to women's participation, because it is not only climate change, it is about the need of women that we are going to address, because they are likely the most affected ones. And, because the kind of norms that we have, that they have to take care of the father, the husband, the child, and all these kind of things. It is not only her responsibility. So it's very important to undermine that climate action is also taking an action for women's rights. And it's not two separated things, unfortunately, because it is going to change the condition of this woman, likely, like it is happening already. So therefore, if what we do in our organization is also that we are very good at speaking up and hold people accountable for their action. And if we see that the gender representation is not enough, then we do make sure that they listen about this. And this kind of reporting, and people that come from research background, that we have the access to research that can show the kind of results that are needed and the kind of effects, what happens when we don't include women. So, just what you have, just your skills and knowledge, and something that I really believe in, what is my drive, is that if you are not, and if you cannot be a resource for anybody else, all your knowledge and skills, they're valued to zero for me, because you didn't use it right. This is that's just a summary of what I believe in.
Yeah, thank you, Anam. Indeed, you mentioned about the very important, importance of role of research, and by having this, I will invite Amreen Salim, who is one of our research partner in this leading resilience project, which we are bringing with the approach of coffee tables. So, Amreen, over to you. You need to unmute yourself, dear.
Thank you very much, Anila, and thank you everyone for the inspiring insights and for your perspectives on climate change, and in particular how women are disproportionately affected by it. I will just share some insights into our work that we do at SEEK, and if Saran can help me with the slides, please, sharing the slides. Just to change a little bit of the mood and format, I will use some slides and share details about the organization that I have co-founded with Subal Bashir, and what we do at SEEK Feminist Research to Response Network. I will share a little bit about who we are and how we contribute to social justice initiatives. And then I will move on to share about what is the project that we have co-created with our community members, with our partners, and with our network members, that is the coffee tables. But most importantly, why we are doing that. So we are a network of researchers, responders, working towards social justice for all, as I mentioned. And for SEEK, climate justice is one of the key focal areas, and we have been working on advocating climate justice in our projects. I can mention one, which is I Am Because We Are, and we work with Hyla Foundation on that project, and we bring the stories of climate change affectees and advocates in that project in a media campaign. Next, please. So at SEEK, we collaborate with peoples, organizations, and communities to share the knowledges, to enrich the knowledge landscape, and to empower women and girls' rights, in particular migrant and refugee girls, by inclusion of our voices in the policies and initiatives concerning us. And in this way, we give them the microphone to elaborate on the problems that they face and suggest the solutions that work for them. Like Razia just mentioned, what is the situation and what is the solution that they propose to manage that situation. Next, please. So for today, I will share about our project, the Leading Resilience, Feminist Leadership for Climate Justice, what it means for us. And I will share a little bit about why we are doing this, because it is very important to know why we are doing this. This helps us in in clarifying ourselves, but also in sharing to the world the importance of the aspects that are shared by Anam and Razia and Seyran. So what has been on the climate change agenda and what has been on the tables is that World Meteorological Organization outlines that global temperatures set to break records during the next 5 years. So there is 98% of likelihood that the next 5 years period would be the warmest on record. This will have far-reaching effects on environment, on health, on food security, and on water management, to name a few. By 2030, an estimated 700 million people will be at risk of displacement by the drought alone. The effects of floods and other climate change related factors is another great story. So as the SDG 13 outlines and emphasizes to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. So taking urgent action is therefore an imperative in order to save lives and livelihoods. But the question is how these efforts can be just for everyone. So climate justice entails ensuring representation, inclusion, and protection of the rights of those most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. But what is climate justice for us? For us, as Mary Robinson, a leader in human rights, states, and I quote, climate justice insists on a shift from a discourse on greenhouse gases and melting ice caps into a civil rights movement with the people and with the communities most vulnerable to the impacts at its heart. So while everyone talks about carbon and greenhouse emissions at COP27, the human side of the story is missing on the tables. And that is why we bring coffee tables to bring the missing perspective, to bring the missing human sides of the stories to the tables at the COP28 and onwards. And in this project, we bring the lived experiences and knowledges of women as frontline responders. As Razia mentioned, that it matters how we are prepared, how we adapt to it, how we respond to it, how resilient we are. So for us, the affectees of climate change as women, as feminist leaders, and also as practitioners of social justice endeavors, we are vulnerable, we are marginalized women, and for us, the everyday matters. Every day matters for us in a way that climate change affects and impacts our everyday. How we deal with climate change in our daily life matters. What is caused by climate change and how it hits us, how we are prepared, how we adapt to it, and the ways in which we respond and practice resilience matters for us. As maybe Anila would talk a little bit more about the project, we document and bring the stories to the coffee tables. And we do this by promoting evidence-based policymaking. And at SEEK, we take recommendations in the forms of policy briefs, policy pointers, policy papers. So we try to bridge the gap in perspective of women affected by the policies and the actual policies. And in this way, we bring the missing human side of the story. Next, please. I would like to just share a quote by one of the youth climate justice organizers. It is well, and I quote, it is well acknowledged that across the globe, people who have the least role in causing the climate crisis are bearing the brunt of it. Like Razia mentioned, how women are disproportionately affected, and she shared the stories of women with us. Women are they are not ones causing climate change or contributing in a larger way to the climate crisis, but they are the one who are bearing the brunt of it. So I would like to say that it's an important journey that we need to begin, and we do so in learning, contributing, and progressing together with new women connectors, but also with our partners. And this is all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambreen, and for also the insight and also for allowing us to learn more about our session today and why we're also here. What is it that we all are affected by? So I would like to, with that, go over to our next speaker as well, Ali Jilani. He is a development practitioner. He has over 10 years and more of activism at all different levels, where he's working on advocacy, capacity building, and research as well on access to justice, climate change, conflict transformation, and democratic processes. Welcome, Ali, and over to you.
Hi, thank you. First of all, I'm really happy to be the only man in the room. I think it's absolutely to have feminist perspectives going as far as climate justice, development justice as a perspective. Thank you, Anila, for looping me in. I basically level with the United Nations and other perspectives that we've been engaged with recently.
Go ahead, Ali.
I think you lost me for a bit. I don't know if I'm audible anymore.
No worries at all. No worries. Take
Okay,
your time.
I'm back in. All right. Yeah.
Take your time.
Yes, I basically wanted to cover some of the perspectives in terms of our engagement, but let me introduce the first. So I'm basically from Pakistan, but I now lead the Asian Pacific Regional Engagement Mechanism. It's advocacy task group. We are basically a network of 640 plus organizations from 43 countries in Asia and the Pacific. And most of our activism is basically around development justice that has different sort of like transformative shifts, one of them being climate justice. Now, to go back to the idea, I mean, I just wanted to cover something in retrospect. I mean, the emphasis on people and the planet or environmental protection or climate is nothing new as far as development processes are concerned. So in the 1980s, there was this Norwegian ex-prime minister from Norway who was sort of made in charge of commission by the United Nations. They produced a report in the 1980s categorically emphasizing the need to have climate as a cross-cutting emphasis across development processes. But somehow, as we see, there's a lot of rhetoric, but you don't see much coming through in terms of policy coherence. So what we saw was in the 1999, you got the Millennium Development Goals with really no emphasis on climate change. However, the sort of like, process changed in 2015. I happen to be, part of that process. Also, we've been in the activism since then. And we got this one particular goal, goal 13 on climate action. However, some of the concerns that we have as our development network from the Global South is that, they still have this goal 17, which is called means of implementation. And one of the components in there is on follow-up and review, which is basically very diluted. And, we are constantly pushing for that to be sort of like, made a little bit more in terms of like, sharpened in terms of advocacy as well as, accountability. For us to get anything out of these global development processes. We understand globally that there's a lot of business as usual approach as far as development practice is concerned. Vis-a-vis, we also have serious reservations in terms of corporatocratization of our development processes. So you have these big tech companies and others who are given messiah status on negotiation tables across the United Nations processes, and we continue to condemn them because they are primarily responsible for the climate change related issues as we see it. And I think there's a lot of literature coming through categorically emphasizing those who have been responsible historically. And I think it's time that we started taxing them. And even one of the very key recommendations that we're pushing with the UN is the idea of retrospective taxation, because we also see that there's been a certain sense of denial of science in the past. I mean, these multinationals have known in terms of what their extractive, for instance, in the fossil fuels industry, in the extractive industry, they've known the implications of their actions in terms of environmental degradation, but there's been a certain sense of denial in acknowledging that, and that has had catastrophic impacts, as we see it. Just to give you two examples of our multilateral processes failure in terms of mobilizing political will and leadership. So as the network, we were following one of the conferences in 2021. It was the World Trade Organization's ministerial conference happening at the very heart of COVID-19, right? So we were in COVID. And one of the recommendations coming from the General Assembly was to waive the trade-related intellectual property stipulations so that everybody around the global south could access a single dose of vaccine. But unfortunately, the WTO's ministerial conference in the middle of COVID-19 denied that. We saw a very clear failure of multilateral processes in that context. And I would like to relate that with the idea of climate financing as well, where we see, I heard the speakers earlier also very clearly articulating that, those least responsible for climate change are facing the worst consequences of its, ramifications, especially around the global south. So that sort of pattern perhaps needs to be democratized, not just in terms of ensuring equitable financing, but also in terms of technical and technological support for the developing countries. Now, speaking of the region in particular, I mean, we have this global unity these days. It's called the global social contract between people and governments of the world. It's called the Sustainable Development Goals. One of the speakers earlier mentioned about something about sustainability. This framework in the Asia and the Pacific are 43 countries. None of them is in a position to achieve this framework by 2065. And as a matter of fact, this 2065 timeline is based on 53% of the available data. So we don't even know what the unknown is in the remaining 47%, right? So the scale of unpredictability is humongous. And one of the key goals where we have regression in terms of environmental performance is on climate action goal 13, which is why I see, I mean, these sort of platforms like the one we are at today, very important in terms of trying to galvanize discourse around those issues. Now, what we call triple planetary crises basically encapsulates not just climate change, but also the increasing biodiversity loss, as well as air and water pollution issues that we face. We, as a network, identify three key determinants. The first is extraction, processing, and distribution and use of fossil fuels and the entire industry and its operations. The other that we see is the natural resource extraction industry, meaning oil, gas, and mining, as well as some of the technologies they use, for instance, fracking, which has devastating impacts for the environment, including cancers for people, as well as destruction of water tables and so on and so forth. Just to quickly give you a glimpse of the regions, because we see that the situation is similar across Latin America and Africa, but I'll give you a picture in terms of where Asia and the Pacific stands that we represent as a network. So over 92% of the population in the entire region is exposed to air pollution, one dimension of the planetary crisis. No metropolitan city in Asia and the Pacific meets any of the WHO air quality standards. The share of Asian countries in particular in terms of carbon emissions has almost doubled. It was 25.3 in the 1990s. And recently, especially because of the Chinese emphasis on industrialization, it has gone to 51.6% over the last decade, the tracking that we have recently done. But if you remove the 40% contribution from China, then you're only talking about barely 11% from 40 plus countries who are actually at the receiving end of the worst consequences of climate change. 9 out of 24 Asian countries have experienced a decline in environmental performance over the last decade. And in terms of that sort of a metrics, when we see international rankings, there are a lot of countries who are rocking the bottom from our region, especially in terms of climate action. And like I said, even within the framework of sustainable development, we are regressing on goal 13. And in the middle of all of that, the other issue that I wanted to cover is the idea of lack of policy coherence. So while all of that is happening, we still see massive subsidies to the fossil fuels industry across development budgets in developing countries, as well as massive privatization schemes going through. Both of these perspectives, I feel that, have to be challenged from within the feminist development justice perspective. The other, quickly, I wanted to cover, one slide on the issue of, some of the myths that they are trying to repackage for us. So biomass is being promoted as clean, renewable fuel and, greener alternative to da-da-da-da-da. But the thing is that, there are several ramifications and implications when you look at the science emerging now, and I think we need to start challenging those perspectives. Hydropower is another extremely favored stream, repackaged as, a source, but there are several issues in terms of, there are generational debt traps, especially in the developing countries. I'm sure everybody has read John Perkins, the economic hitman story. So we see all of those kind of solutions that are being repackaged are not sustainable. The other stream that they are trying to push through these days is the geothermal technique, with which also we need to be very careful, especially around the geological hotspots, to avoid earthquakes as a byproduct. So, what I mean to emphasize here is the lack of policy coherence. So most of the times, in developing countries, when we don't have the backup from, technical capacity and research, what we do is we try to address one issue and, do a development policy initiative concerning that, but it does have ramifications on so many other fronts that we tend to ignore. So those kind of things, we cannot afford anymore. Now, speaking quickly in terms of what we face as Pakistan, multidimensional poverty, 38.3%, and now it's skyrocketed even further with the current situation that we have and the blackmailing that we continue to face with the IMF and co. The other issue that we have is literally at the receiving end of some of the most catastrophic implications of climate change. Despite our meager carbon footprint, I'll just give you 3 decades data where we have had 150 plus extreme weather events. It includes everything: earthquakes, devastating floods in 2010, 11, 18, and 22, prolonged droughts, and then we recently just were on the verge of a cyclone, so we sort of like skipped it. Now, we're also facing a lot of issues in terms of biodiversity, air pollution, especially in my city in Karachi. You won't imagine, how crazy it is. So we literally are on the receiving end of planetary crises as you define it in a package, and perhaps include even a couple more. Now, what needs to be done? In terms of concluding, we recently did a 14 countries research on climate justice. We feel that all those multilateral processes, not just Paris Agreement, Sendai Framework, COP28 that is coming forward, and the 27 that we've been involved with, we feel that there's a lot of democratization that needs to be done, especially in terms of development discourse. It doesn't have to be an act of benevolence anymore from the global north. I think they need to acknowledge their historical responsibility, not just for the colonial plunder that they've been, sort of. It's slowly, and you see it's emerging as a discourse, but the thing is, there are sophisticated patterns that continue to be pushed through, especially in terms of neoliberal regimes in the international trade domain, where Pakistan again was one of the recipients of a slap of around $5 billion in one of the cases, which is called investor state dispute settlement. Now, it's a neoliberal instrument which constrains your policy space if you are a small country, and there's a lot of blackmailing going and so on and so forth. So your government cannot even take a decision in terms of protecting its citizens' rights to environmental protection and so on and so forth. The other thing that we produced as a recommendation from this was the idea of global north, needs to own the responsibility for climate degradation and climate change. And I think loss and damages fund and initiatives like that need to be encouraged. One critical recommendation that we will be pushing through next month also at the high-level political forum of the UN General Assembly is the idea of vertical and horizontal dimensions of policy coherence, especially in terms of CPEIR and nationally determined commitments and so on and so forth. I want to conclude on the splits in our critical consciousness. I'll just give you two statistics very quickly. In 2021, we saw that the military expenditure globally exceeded $2.1 trillion, whereas the global development expenditure remained at $185 billion only. Although the developing countries, the developed countries, global north, gives us only 0.75% of their gross national income. So I think there has to be, within our discussions, we also need to start talking about financing as a major issue, especially in terms of climate justice, right? So when you have $2.1 trillion, amassed for military expenditure, what about development expenditure? And similarly, the other issue which is linked with climate is the idea of illicit financial flows. So we're talking about multinational corporations in illicit financial flows, tax evasions, asset stealth, profit shifting, trade mispricing, and so on and so forth. So they take $2.1 trillion out of developing countries every 10 years, and then give us $185 or $90 billion every year for development. So I think these smaller countries in the global south don't even need development financing if the multinational corporations from the rich countries operating in small countries start paying their taxes fairly. So I think those are also some of the interlinkages that we need to exposing and highlighting, because they are very critical if we are to realize climate and development justice for all. I thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you so much, Ali, for providing us all these perspectives. I for sure was enlightened and learned so much more from all of our speakers. And we are we're still going ahead. We have one of our last speakers with us as well, who will provide us some of our closing remarks. I want you to welcome Olanike Olugboji. She is have been working on women empowerment and advocacy, and also has launched her initiative for Women's Initiative for a Sustainable Environment. Please welcome, and over to you, Olanike.
Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry I joined a bit late. I got my time mixed up. Nice to see you, Anila. And I think the bit I've heard was quite insightful, even though I don't know how much was said, about making some of the interventions or responses to be kind of feminized. And I want to say that the role that women should be playing, in driving climate solutions remains so backward, because women have over the years been marginalized. I'm not trying to say that this song should continue to be sung, because I'm not giving to that. But what I want to say is the issue of climate change is something that directly affects the lives of women. For example, in my part of the world, you find out that women are still ill-informed. We have various programs that we have launched. For example, there's one we call Bridge and Bank, which is focused on climate smart farming, for women. And when you interact with these women, you can visibly see and tell that these women don't even know what is happening as regards climate change. And so generally, when you look at the lives of women, especially those at the grassroots, notwithstanding that their lives are worst impacted by the changes that we're experiencing in climate, they don't have the resources, they don't have the information, they lack the skills, to be at the front lines of addressing these challenges. And so I want to say, if we're talking about policies, we're talking about finance, we're talking about programs, it must be gender responsive. I saw a report released recently by the United Nations in terms of where we are at now, looking at gender equity, and it's looking like, the gap has widened more than closed up. So I was so excited when I saw this invitation from Anila talking about feminist leadership for climate justice. I look at, COP over the years, and I'm wondering what exactly is happening there when the voices of the people who are worst affected by climate change is missing from the table. I'm not saying, just give women access to the table, but I'm saying we need to listen. We need to support women. We need to put the resources in the hands of women so that they can be at the table. And I want to say, Anila, thank you for putting this together. I want to say I'm in, I want to say I'm interested. And incidentally, right now, this week, we will be launching another, we have an ongoing training where we are also equipping women with the knowledge, skills, and finances that would help them be at the front lines of driving climate solutions. I hope that, with COP28, we're going to see a shift in narrative. We're going to see a shift in participation where, women are actually visible, women's voices can be heard, and then, everyone's voices count. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anika, for the closing remarks and for your contribution. I surely feel energized and empowered and so much more motivated because I know I'm sure that we will do this together. We are here today because of we're talking about our process of leading resilience, but because it is this resilience within us that we need to make together. And as we have talked about it today, the different topics in terms of the importance of interlinkages, but also of having the gender lens present and restating it is so important because it is something that not only is at the core of the issue, but is also the core solution for the topics that we're discussing. So we are still, I would like to mention before closing today, a bit about our process forward. For all those who have been following and are still with us, thank you so much for still being here with us. I wanted to present a little bit about how you can also join us, how Leading Resilience can be joining together with you as well. We have our manifesto for the COP28 that will be take place in Dubai, and we will be bringing our demand, we'll be bringing our voices, and bringing our feminist leadership for climate justice, where we aim to then gather feminist leaders from climate affected countries to provide critical information at COP28. And with our manifesto, it promotes rethinking traditional climate change responses and providing a safe space, especially for women to share ideas and incubate projects. And the way that we're doing it in terms of, as Ambreen as well presented, is that we can all join the CoFe Champions Table, and we are working on the solution to build a feminist ecosystem for climate action. And we have the possibility of this to come to your city and have these coffee tables. Please do reach out to us in terms of if you want to join and to learn more about how you can get involved with the Champions Table. These will take place from now and up to November to December, and we'll be visiting across 13 different countries, both on global level, and following, as Ali mentioned, the importance of the SDG 13 and conducting dialogues on 13 tables and gathering together with primarily our feminist leaders and supporters as well. So we hope that you will join us. We have our information is on our website and also available for you, for those of you who followed and joined us today. Thank you so much for being with us and for listening and for sharing your thoughts and your input, and to all of our speakers as well. Thank you so much for your input and contribution. These conversations we have as today is so important, because this will be leading to the way for us to envision and to enable our manifesto for the upcoming COP28. Anila, over to you for the closing statement.
No, I don't want to say any statement. You all said what I wanted to say. Just like it's just a starting point, relinking, reconnecting, and to make sure to bring our voices on the table, but also try to change the policy, systematic change, how being a color woman we are taking as a second thought, and how we can say we are here, we are leaders, and we are leading the resilience we live in. Thank you so much, each of you, and it means a lot to us for joining us, and stay connected. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.